Guys, I want to present our next speaker. He will be from the United States. It will be a video recorded speech, so we can't answer the questions. But if you have some great questions, maybe you can write them in chat and we will transfer it to Perry. This guy who is a legend in paid traffic, it's Perry Marshall, a business strategist, founder of Perry and Marshall Associates USA. Perry Marshall is one of the most expensive business strategists in the world. He is endorsed in Forbes and in INC Magazine, and he's authored 10 books. At London's Royal Society, he announced the world's largest science research challenge, the 10 million Evolution 2.0 prize. His reinvention of the Pareto Principle published in a Harvard Business Review, and his Google book laid the foundation of the 100 billion pay-per-click industry. He has a degree of engineering and lives with his family in Chicago. So meet Perry Marshall and his speech about PPC Trends in 2023.
Hi, this is Perry Marshall. I am author of 80/20 Sales and Marketing, Ultimate Guide to Google Ads, Ultimate Guide to Facebook Ads, Definitive Guide to TikTok Advertising, and soon to come, Definitive Guide to YouTube Advertising. And I want to talk to you about some very important concepts around pay-per-click, where I feel like there's a lot of PPC geniuses, ninjas are very good at writing ads or targeting or using the different platforms, but still get their butt kicked in the marketplace because there are larger strategic things that they didn't think of first. And so I want to talk to you about those things. And this is my presentation here. I want to talk to you about harnessing 80/20 to pick battles that you can win in pay-per-click. And the problem is that what you think is the problem is almost never the problem. Most of the time when a client comes to me, and I have worked with thousands of clients in 300 industries, everything from patent attorneys to bowling alleys to software companies to banks to cryptocurrency firms and hair salons. Most clients think they have a problem and it's not the real problem. You dig in and you find out that they're working on the wrong problem. And so I want to give you some filters for not doing that anymore. And so there's always a perceived problem and a real problem. And so the perceived problem is excessive customer acquisition problems, which most PPC people approach as well, then we need to do a better job optimizing ads, campaigns, targeting, all of that. And that's true, but usually the real problem is the business, the product they're trying to sell is not a star business or not a star product. And I'm going to define star in a very, very particular way in a few minutes. In brief terms, it means number one in a growing market, which means that you've chosen a market very carefully and you've defined yourself in such a way that you really are number one, according to some set of criteria. I'll get into that in a minute. Low quality scores and click-through rates, which most people try to approach by, I got to write different ads, better ads. The real problem is bridging the clickbait customer response to the actual solution, because it's pretty easy to write clickbait ads, but it's hard to then get a high conversion rate when you're attracting low quality customers. Poor conversions. The real problem is that you don't understand your market. Yeah, the superficial problem is that your copy was bad or you needed better pictures or something like that. But at the very least, you don't understand what your customer is thinking when they're on your website. Thick competition. And we're conditioned to compete. When you go to a football game, a soccer game, a tennis game, the World Cup, we like to watch people compete. But in business, the worst thing you can do is compete. You want a moat. You want a moat around your castle where you're the only one. You really want a monopoly. And the perceived problem, again, is leaky buckets. Well, I get customers, but they just disappear. A lot of times the real problem is poor tracking and bad data, and you don't really know what's going on. Perceived problem. I want to talk about this for a minute or two. From the client side and the agency side, they're a revolving door. The clients are constantly coming and going. The agencies are constantly coming and going. Oh, these people must be idiots. Well, these people are dishonest. I do 6 months of work for them. I do all the heavy lifting. Then they cancel my contract. They go hire somebody cheaper. Well, that problem has existed in lots of industries. I think the real problem is both sides are half committed. The agencies are trying to get as much money for as little work as possible. And the clients are trying to pay as little money to get as much work as possible. Where really they should have an agreement. I think agencies should have an agreement that says, you can't fire me for being too successful. I think you need to set an expectation up front with the client. In fact, you need to define a formula. What is success? And if I'm achieving that result, you can't fire me because I'm making you successful. And then that gives the agency the incentive to do the really hard work of making it happen. I want to talk to you about star businesses. I think this is one of the most important concepts that exists in business. I don't see very many people teaching it, even though it's 50 years old. A Boston Consulting Group came up with this a long, long time ago. I think it's just about square one for deciding about any business that you're going to get into. So there's 4 kinds of businesses: stars, question marks, cash cows, and dogs. And on the vertical, this is really a growth chart. And on the vertical axis, going up and down, the dotted line across the middle represents a 10% growth rate. So stars are companies and markets that are growing faster than 10% a year. Cash cows and dogs on the lower half of the screen are companies that are in markets that are growing less than 10% a year. And then running down the middle, dividing the left from the right, is the dotted line where are you number one in that market on the left versus on the right, you're number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6. And so what this says is that almost all of the growth that exists in any market comes from companies in the upper left-hand quadrant. They are stars. They are number one in their market, and the market is growing more than 10%. If you want to buy stocks in the stock market and make money, if you want to start a business and make money, if you want to have a chance at being profitable, you need, as a consultant, you need clients who are stars. That's where all the future growth is. And stars also require a lot of investment. They're expensive to run. They may not be profitable, but that's where the equity is growing. Cash cows are companies that are number one in a market that is no longer growing 10%. And those are the Procter and Gamble's and the Toyotas and the Googles, and in fact, Google and Facebook are still stars, really. But the established companies like Sony or Coca-Cola, they've been in that business for a long time. They're number one in that business. That's where most of the profit is made. And in business, you only want to be a star or a cash cow. And that's only 20% of the businesses. 80% of the businesses are question marks and dogs. If you're in a growing market, but you're not number one, you're a question mark. And what that means is you might be profitable and you might have a good life, but you might not. A lot of companies that are number 2, 3, 4, 5 are not doing very well, even though they're in a growing market and even though they may be growing. It's very hard to do well when you're not number one, which is the real point of what I'm trying to say. And then dogs are companies that are not number one and not in a growing market, and they are universally in bad shape. It's a skinny little restaurant with, the knob is broken on the restroom door because frankly, the owner can't afford to spend $50 on a new doorknob, because they have to eat, and you definitely don't want to be a dog. So how do you be a star? If you're not number one in a growing market, you have to pick a part of the market that's nobody's addressing and make yourself the first person to be number one in that market. In other words, it's very fine market segmentation. And this is more important than anything else you could learn in PPC. Because if you're a question mark or a dog, especially if you're a dog, you don't have any chance of having a profitable business, no matter how good your ads are, no matter how good your copy is, no matter how good your PPC managers are. It just can't be done. And every company in the history of Earth that's ever done well in PPC did well because it's not a dog. They were a star or a cash cow. And I have a free scorecard. If you go to starprinciple.com, you can answer a dozen questions, take you about a minute, and it will give you a score and it will tell you where you are on this. And you can break it down, not just at a company level, but at a product level. And you can also break it down like, well, I'm number one on Google, but I'm nowhere to be found on TikTok. Then it applies to Google and TikTok. Maybe you're a star in Google and you're a dog in TikTok, so you don't do TikTok and you just do Google. That works. And so what do you do with these? Well, 80% of the growth comes from stars and 80% of the profit comes from cash cows. So if you're a star, you invest and you grow. And if you're a cash cow, you protect it any way you can so that you can keep getting the milk from the cow. And Star Principle applies at all levels. So it applies to companies and brands and product lines, individual products within a product line. You can have a really good company with a really great product line, but you could still find that some products are dogs and others are stars and others are cash cows. And it definitely applies to media channels. So a company that's number one in the newspaper may not be found on Google. A company that's number one in Facebook may not be on YouTube. And you could very easily maintain a number one position in Facebook and never be able to get a foothold in YouTube because there are other stars in YouTube that got there before you. And they're number one in the market and you're not. And one of the biggest mistakes I ever see people making is they try to beat a number one with brute force or with a little better ads or a little bit of better marketing or a little better copy. And it almost never works. You have to carve out a new niche and become number one in that niche and go from there. Now, in my opinion, building and optimizing a Google or Facebook or YouTube account is really applying 80-20. All across the board. It's all an 80-20 game. So this is an exercise I do with audiences all the time. And I say, pick a number between 1 and 50, and somebody says 17. Okay. So I'm going to click on this link. Give me a second. And I'm going to put number 17. This is running the 80-20 curve at 8020curve.com. And the 80-20 curve is calculating based on the population of the world and the fact that there's 200 countries, how big is country number 17? And I mouse over it, it says 76.4 million. Well, if I jump back over to my slides and I click on the Wikipedia link, I get list of countries by population, and I find out that number 17 has 83 million people. Well, again, what was my guess? The guess a second ago was 76 million people. So I was off by probably 10% on a random country. Okay, number 17. What am I saying here? Well, what I'm saying is that 80-20 is so predictable and so reliable that if I pick a random country and run it through an 80-20 formula, it will tell me the size of that country. It will tell me, or it could be the size of the city. It could be the amount of money that a customer spent. So this tool could tell you, if you're a $3 million company and you have 500 customers, 80-20 will tell you how much money your number 17 customer spent, how much money your number 1 customer spent, with spooky accuracy. It will typically be accurate within plus or minus 10%. And this is one of my top discoveries ever. About 20 years ago, I suddenly realized the 80-20 principle, which says that 80% of your business comes from 20% of your customers, and 20% of your business comes from 80% of your customers. It's a rule of the universe. It is a law of physics. It is almost inviolable, and it runs the world and applies to everything. And so I'm going to quickly jump past several things here. If I put the population of actual population of countries in the world on an 80-20 graph, where the real data is the blue and the theory is the black, this is what it looks like. This is how accurate 80-20 is. If I say Southwest Airlines is number 167 in the Fortune 500, the 80-20 curve will tell you, well, there it is right there, and it's $14 billion of revenue. If I take the Forbes 400 and put them in the 80-20 curve, the blue is their actual net worth, and the black is the theory based on the 80-20 principle. I have a Harvard Business Review article that I wrote in 2018 that outlines the math of this, if anybody wants to go look at it. This is donations to a church on a single Sunday morning, mapped against the 80-20 principle. This is the dairy output of Wisconsin counties, 38 counties. How much milk did they produce against an 80-20 curve? And 80-20 tells you that what's average is the wrong question. You don't say, what's the average ad in my Facebook account? What's the average ad in my Google account? What's the average number of clicks? The right question is, who are the superstars and how super are they? Because let's go back to my original statement. I said that managing a Google, Facebook, YouTube, PPC account is really a matter of applying 80-20. And what it really is you only work on 20% of the account. 80% of it doesn't matter. In fact, usually 90% of it doesn't matter. 10% of it matters a lot. And you need to hyper optimize. And you'll find that there's 1 or 2 or 3 ads that generate almost all of your business, 1 or 2, 3 or 3 campaigns that generate almost all of the traffic and generate all of the conversions. And you find that there's very big hinges they're very big doors that swing on very tiny hinges. So in PPC, 80-20 applies to impressions, clicks, conversions, campaigns, ad groups, shares, likes, trolls, traffic sources, clients, support tickets, market dominance. Cash cows and stars are the 20% of companies that get 80% of the money. Now, then we can apply it because there's a positive side and a negative side. There's the profitable side where all of the benefit comes from, but there's also a red side. So I have a friend named Len Bertain, and he has this thing called the 21-20 rule. It says that 20% of what you do produces 120% of your profit. 60% of what you do breaks even, and 20% of what you're doing loses 20%, and it brings you down to the 100% that you actually made. So this is true in your clients, like the profitability of clients. If you have 5 clients, one of them is making you some real good money, 60% are keeping the lights on, and one of them is losing money, not making money, and you would make more money if you fired that client. It's also true of PPC campaigns. It's true of keywords. 20% of your keywords produce 120% of your profits. 20% of your keywords lose 20% of your profits. And oftentimes you don't know it. And you only know through better tracking and stuff like that. Well, then so we can apply 80-20 on the positive and the negative side. So when we look at the negative side, there's a handful of clients, very small number of clients, very small number of products, very small number of defects, very small number of employees that are losing all of the money that's being lost. And so everything I just said applies to a whole bunch of things: time, productivity, employees, talents and skills, assets, defects, vendors, managers, relationships, products, media channels. Now, let's talk about moats. I said in the beginning, when I was explaining how most people's problem is not their real problem, the biggest problem is you don't have a moat around your castle, and it's easy for competition to rip you off. Well, I want to introduce the idea of network effect. And network effect is like Uber, when buyers attract riders, attract drivers, and then drivers attract riders, which lowers the wait time, which attracts more riders, which attracts more drivers, which lowers the wait time, which attracts more riders, which attracts more drivers. Now, what happens eventually is that it becomes impossible to start a new taxi company because you could never compete. In the United States, we have Uber and Lyft and nobody else. Now, yeah, they're independent taxi companies and they still exist and they can still make a living, but they don't make billions of dollars. And new competition can hardly, it's virtually impossible for it to come in because of the network effect that cements Uber and Lyft already own the customers and they already own the drivers. It would cost an insane amount of money to start a new one and try to compete with them. And I realize that you all know that, and of course it would be stupid, but I want you to apply this to your own businesses and your own clients. You want your business to be constructed so that buyers attract sellers, seller attracts buyers, buyers attract reviews, reviews attract buyers, buyers create data, data attracts buyers, speed attracts customers and vendors, customers and vendors attract speed. This is how modern businesses work. And when I work with clients, I always talk to them about how can we build network effect and feedback into your business. I've done this in so many industries. I've done this in roofing. I've done this in patent law. I've done this in all kinds of software businesses. And that moat protects you from competition. It's not high bid prices. You're paying the highest bid price, but you're making money and nobody else is because you have a moat around your castle. Once you get a customer, you never lose them. If you put it on a diagram, it looks like this, where input from customers gets fed back into the process and you refine it. And the money travels from the customer to you. The product delivery travels from you back to the customer. And it's a virtuous circle where all of the most important things are refined. And you, as a result of doing all this, you have trade secrets that would cost somebody else even more money than it cost you. And so now they can't break into your market. And if you double the speed at which this happens, you get 4 times the feedback, 4 times the market information, and ultimately 4 times the market velocity. Feedback always wins. Wrapping up here, these concepts are elaborated upon in my book, 80/20 Sales and Marketing, The Definitive Guide to Working Less and Making More. It's got more than 800 4.7 star reviews on Amazon. And it also includes the marketing DNA test, which it costs $37 separately. There's a link inside the book that gets you that test free. It will tremendously, the marketing DNA test, if you are doing any kind of media buying or marketing, it will help you understand how you, as an individual, use media in your own strengths and weaknesses. And it will shape what kind of role that you play in PPC campaigns. You know, there's some people who they're immensely creative, they're empathetic, they write great ads, they write clickbait headlines. There are other people that are extremely good at analysis and numbers. And you need to design your career so that it caters to your best strengths. And so that test is included with this. The book 80/20 Sales and Marketing is $14, including shipping internationally to Europe. So you get the book and it gets shipped to you. And when you sign up, you'll also get immediate videos and downloads that you can use right now. It's at sell8020.com. If you're in a country that we don't ship to, you can go to Amazon and you can buy the Audible version. You can buy the Kindle version, and it's available for instant download. That's an option too. But this book will absolutely change your life. That's it. Again, my name is Perry Marshall, author of 80/20 Sales and Marketing. Really great presenting to you today. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you, Perry. Thank you for great speech. As I mentioned, this speech we will have the video recorded. Perry can't join to us today live, but at the same time, it was a great, insightful, and very, very important for all our listeners' speech.